Maria Woodworth-Etter, the woman who carried the fiery documentary narration script through history. God has often chosen the people the world least expected. When society said they could not be used, God said otherwise. When critics tried to silence them, God amplified their voice. And among the most remarkable of these people was a humble woman named Maria Woodworth-Etter. Long before modern revival movements, long before stadium crusades, long before Christian television and social media, there was Maria Woodworth-Etter, a woman whose ministry would leave thousands in awe and pave the way for generations of revivalists to come. Born in 1844 in rural Ohio, Maria's early life was marked by hardship, loss, and suffering. She grew up in a time when women were rarely allowed to preach. The idea of a female evangelist was considered unacceptable by many churches. But God often calls people beyond the limits imposed by culture. As a young woman, Maria developed a deep love for Jesus Christ. She desired to serve him wholeheartedly, yet her path would not be easy. Tragedy struck her family repeatedly. Several of her children died at a young age. The grief was overwhelming. The pain was unimaginable. Many people would have abandoned their faith under such circumstances. Many would have become bitter. Many would have questioned God. But Maria chose another path. She pressed deeper into prayer, deeper into dependence on God, deeper into surrender. And it was in that place of brokenness that something extraordinary began to happen. She became convinced that God had called her to preach the gospel. The calling terrified her. At first, she resisted. She felt inadequate, unqualified, unworthy. But the burden of God's call became impossible to ignore. Eventually, she surrendered. And once she did, her ministry began to spread across America. What followed was unlike anything many people had ever witnessed. As Maria preached, unusual spiritual manifestations often occurred. People would suddenly fall under deep conviction of sin. Some stood motionless for hours. Others wept uncontrollably. Many testified of visions, spiritual encounters, and profound experiences with God. Crowds gathered by the thousands. Some came out of curiosity. Some came to mock. Some came because they were desperate. But countless people left transformed. Reporters struggled to explain what they were witnessing. Church leaders debated what was happening. Critics attacked her relentlessly. Yet the meetings continued to grow. Wherever Maria Woodworth-Etter traveled, stories followed, stories of salvation, stories of healing, stories of lives radically changed by the power of God. She became especially known for her healing ministry. The sick came seeking prayer. The broken came seeking hope. The hopeless came seeking answers. And many testified that God touched them in remarkable ways. But perhaps the most astonishing aspect of her ministry was the atmosphere that surrounded it. Eyewitnesses often described a sense of God's presence that seemed almost tangible. Entire crowds would become silent. Hardened hearts would soften. Skeptics would fall to their knees. People who had no intention of responding to God suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by his presence. Years before the great Pentecostal revivals of the 20th century, Maria Woodworth-Etter was already demonstrating many of the spiritual characteristics that would later become associated with those movements. In many ways, she became a bridge between generations, a foreigner, a woman carrying a torch that would help ignite future revival fires. Yet her journey was never free from opposition. She faced criticism because she was a woman. She faced accusations because of the unusual phenomena in her meetings. She faced rejection from religious leaders who could not understand what God was doing. But Maria continued, not because she wanted fame, not because she wanted recognition, but because she believed souls mattered. She believed eternity mattered. She believed Jesus Christ still transformed lives. As the years passed, her influence continued to grow. Young ministers watched her ministry and were inspired. Future revival leaders learned from her. Example. The seed she'd planted would continue bearing fruit long after her earthly ministry ended. When Maria Woodworth-Etter passed away in 1924, she left behind more than memories. She left behind a legacy of courage, a legacy of faith, a legacy of persistence in the face of overwhelming opposition. But perhaps the greatest lesson from her life is this: God specializes in using unlikely people. The world saw limitations. God saw purpose. The world saw weakness. God saw a vessel. The world saw obstacles. God saw opportunity. History remembers Maria Woodworth-Etter as a powerful evangelist, a healing minister, a revival pioneer. But heaven remembers something even greater: a woman who said yes to God when saying yes came with a cost. A woman who carried the fire of revival into a generation desperately hungry for God. And her story still echoes today. Because the same God who called Maria is still calling ordinary people. People willing to trust Him. People willing to obey Him. People willing to surrender everything. For when God finds a yielded heart, He can use one life to touch thousands. And that is the story of Maria Woodworth-Etter. Maria Woodworth-Etter, 1844 to 1924. She carried the fire before the revival came. God uses those who dare to say yes. Once surrendered, life can change generations.